The steel door had stayed buried for decades, until a homeless veteran's dog refused to leave a patch of frozen ground. Metal screamed beneath Wes Harper's hands as the hidden hatch finally gave way. Valor stood over the opening without barking, ears locked forward, refusing to move. A rush of icy air climbed from the darkness below, carrying the smell of old concrete and machine oil. Deep underground, something clicked once, as if it had been waiting for someone to return. What do you think was hidden beneath that mountain? The truck had not moved in 3 days. Its faded blue paint disappeared into the rows of worn-out pickups scattered across the cracked parking lot just outside Billings, Montana. Frost clung to the windshield in thin silver veins, while the first hint of dawn stretched over the distant mountains. Inside, Wesley Harper opened his eyes before the sun cleared the horizon. Not because he had slept well, because he never really slept anymore. A diesel engine roared somewhere behind the truck. Before his mind caught up with reality, his body had already reacted. He rolled off the bench seat, one shoulder striking the floorboard. His right hand reached automatically toward the empty space beside the driver's seat, where a rifle would have rested years ago. His breathing shortened. His eyes searched for cover, exits, movement, contact. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. Then the sound changed. Not mortar fire. Not an explosion. Just an 18-wheeler pulling away from a fuel pump across the highway. The parking lot slowly came back into focus. A convenience store. A faded ice machine. An old Coke sign missing half its paint. Wes stayed where he was for another few seconds before letting out a long breath through his nose. Easy, he muttered to himself. A warm nose nudged his shoulder. Valor. The aging German shepherd hadn't barked. He never did when Wes woke like that. Instead, the dog simply waited until his partner found his way back to the present. Wes scratched behind the dog's ears. You always know. Valor answered by leaning against his leg with quiet certainty. The truck smelled faintly of motor oil, old canvas, coffee grounds, and the wool army blanket that had become both mattress and pillow. Everything Wes still owned fit inside the cab. A duffel bag, a dented toolbox, one cast-iron skillet, several military field manuals he could never bring himself to throw away. A photograph of 3 young soldiers standing beside an armored vehicle somewhere in Iraq. Only one of them was still alive. He reached for his worn leather wallet. One folded dollar bill. Nothing else. He smiled without humor. I guess we made it another day. Valor watched him with calm brown eyes. The dog had served before retirement, just like Wes. Explosives detection. Hundreds of patrols, countless checkpoints. Even now, years after both of them had left the army behind, Valor still inspected every stranger before allowing them close. Old habits survived longer than uniforms. Wes unfolded a yellowed envelope that had become soft from years of handling. His father's handwriting crossed the front. For Wesley. His father had died almost 6 months earlier. A quiet man. A Forest Service ranger who spent most of his life somewhere inside Montana's mountains. The letter wasn't long. If life ever leaves you with nowhere else to go, head west into the Absaroka Range. I left something there that belongs to our family. It isn't money. It isn't comfort. But maybe it'll remind you who you are. The directions were hand-drawn. No explanation. No promises. Just coordinates and one sentence written beneath them. Trust the land before you trust people. Wes folded the letter again. He had spent weeks convincing himself not to go. What good could an abandoned piece of mountain property possibly do for a homeless veteran with $1 left? Still, it was the only destination he had. He climbed out of the truck. The morning air carried the sharp scent of pine from somewhere beyond the interstate. Snow still covered the distant peaks, glowing pink beneath the rising sun. He poured the last of yesterday's water into a dented bowl. Valor drank first. Only after the dog stepped away did Wes finish what remained. Breakfast consisted of half a protein bar broken neatly in two. The larger piece went to Valor. The smaller stayed in Wes's pocket until hunger became impossible to ignore. They climbed back into the truck. The engine hesitated, coughed once, twice, then finally turned over. "Don't quit on me yet," Wes whispered, resting one hand on the dashboard. The pickup rolled onto the highway, heading southwest. Miles slipped away beneath worn tires. Cities gave way to ranches. Ranches became open valleys, then forests. The farther they drove, the quieter the world became. Wes found himself checking mirrors every few minutes without thinking. Scanning ridgelines, watching bridges, measuring distances between tree lines. He noticed every abandoned vehicle, every unusual tire track, every place someone could hide. Combat engineers learned to survive by seeing what others overlooked. That habit never retired. Around noon, they stopped beside a narrow river. Valor jumped out first, stretching stiff legs before sniffing the wind. Wes crouched near the water. His reflection stared back from the slow current. Gray hair, deep lines, a face that looked older than 67. He barely recognized the man looking back. "You made it farther than most." The words escaped before he realized he had spoken them aloud. Maybe he meant himself. Maybe he meant the friends whose names were carved into black granite thousands of miles away. The silence answered for both. By late afternoon, the highway narrowed into an old mountain road. The GPS lost signal. Only the hand-drawn map remained. Towering pines swallowed the fading sunlight. The air cooled quickly beneath the trees. Then something changed. Valor, who had been lying quietly in the passenger seat all day, stood up. His ears locked forward. Every muscle in his body tightened. He wasn't barking. He wasn't growling. He simply stared through the windshield toward the distant Absaroka Mountains, as though he recognized something hidden beyond the trees. Wes eased his foot off the accelerator. "What is it, partner?" Valor never looked away. The mountains waited in complete silence. Wes eased the truck onto the narrow shoulder and killed the engine. Nothing moved. The pine trees stood perfectly still, their dark trunks stretching upward like pillars holding up the evening sky. Even the wind seemed to have wandered somewhere else. Valor climbed out first. Instead of exploring the roadside the way he usually did, he faced the mountains again. His nose lifted slightly into the cold air. He breathed once, then again. Not excited, focused. Wes had seen that posture hundreds of times overseas. Explosives, hidden movement, something out of place. He scanned the ridgeline without thinking, left to right, high ground first, then shadows beneath the trees. Old instincts never asked permission. They simply arrived. After several quiet minutes, Valor relaxed and looked back at him as if nothing unusual had happened. "You keeping secrets now?" Wes asked with a tired smile. The dog wagged his tail once before climbing back into the truck. The dirt road became rougher with every mile. Branches scraped against faded paint. Loose stones struck the undercarriage. Twice Wes climbed out to move fallen limbs that blocked the trail. His knees protested every bend, but he never complained aloud. By the time the sun slipped behind the Absaroka peaks, the truck rolled into a clearing. It wasn't much. A weathered mailbox leaned sideways beside what had once been a fence. Rust covered every hinge. Wild grass swallowed the old driveway. Farther ahead stood the remains of a small cabin. One side of the roof had collapsed years earlier. The porch sagged toward the earth. Broken windows reflected the last orange light of the evening. No smoke, no tracks, no sign that another person had stood there in a very long time. Wes shut off the engine. This is it. His father's map matched perfectly. The silence felt different here, not empty, patient. Valor circled the clearing once before returning beside Wes without wandering farther. The dog rarely stayed that close unless he sensed uncertainty. Wes walked slowly around the cabin. The front steps creaked beneath his boots. Inside, pine needles covered the warped wooden floor. A cast-iron stove leaned slightly against one wall. Dust floated through broken shafts of sunlight where the roof had given way. Someone had once loved this place. Now nature was quietly taking it back. Outside, fresh tire tracks cut across the muddy entrance road. Not old. Recent. Very recent. Two different vehicles. Heavy tread. Neither belonged to his truck. Wes crouched without realizing he had done it. His fingers brushed the edge of one track. Still damp. Less than a day old. Valor stood behind him, ears turning toward the tree line. Another habit returned. Never stand where the skyline can see you. Wes stepped away from the open clearing and positioned himself beside a large pine before studying the tracks again. They weren't sightseeing. A distant engine echoed somewhere down the valley. Minutes later, a black SUV appeared around the bend. It stopped several yards away. A man in his late 50s stepped out wearing polished boots far too clean for mountain roads. His expensive jacket looked more suited to a boardroom than a forest. Behind him climbed out a younger attorney carrying a leather briefcase. The older man smiled as though they were longtime neighbors. "You must be Wesley Harper." "I am. My name's Miles Grayson." He extended a hand. Wes nodded politely but left his own at his side. Grayson withdrew it without embarrassment. "I own Black Ridge Mining, so I've heard." Grayson looked around the property before speaking again. "Beautiful country." Wes followed his gaze. The man wasn't looking at the cabin. He wasn't studying the trees. His eyes lingered somewhere higher along the mountain slope beyond the clearing, only for a second. Then they returned. Small things mattered. Combat engineers survived because they noticed moments like that. "We've been interested in this parcel for quite some time," Grayson continued. "There's nothing here." "Exactly." Grayson smiled. "Nothing useful to you." He nodded toward the cabin. "The structure's beyond saving. No utilities, no road maintenance. Winters up here are brutal." The attorney opened the briefcase and removed several papers. "We'd like to make your life easier." Grayson slid a purchase agreement onto the truck's hood. $30,000. Wes blinked. The county records valued land like this at a fraction of that. For a place with no value? Grayson's smile never changed. "We're expanding operations nearby." Valor suddenly stepped between Wes and the two men. Not barking, not growling, simply standing. His shoulders squared. His eyes never left Grayson. The attorney instinctively took one step backward. Grayson glanced down at the German shepherd. Beautiful dog. He usually likes people. And today? Wes rested one hand gently against Valor's neck. He hasn't decided. The mountain air grew strangely quiet again. Grayson closed the briefcase. "I'll leave the offer with you. Take the evening." He paused before getting back into the SUV. Most people would consider $30,000 a blessing. The black vehicle disappeared back down the mountain road. Wes remained standing long after the engine noise faded. Valor ignored the papers entirely. Instead, he turned once more toward the towering ridgeline above the cabin. His ears rose. Every muscle became still. Whatever had captured his attention yesterday was waiting there again. Morning arrived quietly. Thin ribbons of mist drifted through the pines, softening the mountains into layers of blue and gray. Dew clung to every blade of grass around the abandoned cabin, and somewhere deeper in the forest, a raven called once before falling silent. Wes had slept in the truck, if it could be called sleep. Twice during the night he had awakened with his pulse racing after hearing branches scrape across the roof. Each time he had checked the truck's mirrors, the tree line, and the narrow road before finally settling back beneath the army blanket. Old habits measured safety one direction at a time. Valor had never closed his eyes for more than a few minutes. Now, just after sunrise, the German shepherd stood beside the driver's door, staring toward the mountains again. His breakfast remained untouched. That alone made Wes pay attention. "You've never skipped a meal." Valor sniffed the breeze once. Then he started walking. Not wandering. Walking with purpose. He crossed the clearing without looking back. Wes grabbed his day pack almost automatically. One canteen, a flashlight, a folding knife, a small first aid pouch. Years ago, he would have checked ammunition. Today, there was none. He locked the truck out of habit, although there was little inside worth stealing, then followed. The forest swallowed them within minutes. Morning light filtered through towering lodgepole pines, painting narrow bands of gold across the moss-covered ground. Valor never rushed. He paused every few yards, testing the air before choosing the next direction. Wes noticed something else. The dog wasn't following a game trail. He ignored deer tracks, ignored rabbit scent, ignored everything except one invisible path only he seemed able to find. Combat tracking wasn't so different. Find one sign. Ignore the noise. Trust the pattern. Wes slowed his breathing and began reading the terrain the way he'd once read damaged roads outside Mosul. Steep slopes, natural choke points, good observation positions, loose rock that could betray footsteps. The mountain revealed itself one detail at a time. Nearly 2 hours passed. The climb grew steeper. Patches of old snow still hid beneath shaded cliffs despite the warming season. Valor suddenly stopped. His body stiffened. Not fear. Recognition. He walked toward a rock wall covered in emerald moss. To Wes, it looked like every other cliff they had passed that morning. Solid granite, weathered by decades of snow and rain. Nothing more. Then Valor began digging. Fast, deliberately. Dirt flew behind him in heavy sprays. Within moments, his paws struck something hard. Not stone, metal. Wes knelt beside him. A dull, circular edge peeked through the packed earth. He brushed away mud with both hands. Rust appeared beneath his fingertips. Iron. He worked more carefully now. The object wasn't small. It disappeared beneath layers of compacted soil and tangled roots. Another half-hour passed before its shape finally emerged. A heavy steel ring, bolted into something beneath the mountain. Wes wrapped both hands around it. He pulled. Nothing. He shifted his footing and tried again. The ring refused to move. It isn't a pipe. Valor stepped back, watching silently. Wes studied the surrounding ground. Someone had buried this on purpose. Long ago. He searched nearby until he found a fallen pine branch thick enough to use as a lever. The first attempt failed. The second produced only a faint groan beneath the earth. On the third, something broke free with a deep metallic sound that echoed through the mountains. The ground itself seemed to sigh. Dust drifted upward. A narrow seam appeared beneath the moss. Wes froze. Slowly he cleared more dirt away. Steel plates, massive ones, bolted together beneath nearly 3 feet of earth. He followed the edges with his hands until he understood what he was looking at. Not a hatch, not a cellar door, a blast door, far larger than anything a private landowner would ever build. His heartbeat settled into the slow, controlled rhythm he remembered from dangerous places. Excitement got people killed. Observation kept them alive. He circled the area carefully. No fresh footprints, no recent digging, only decades of leaves, pine needles, and weather hiding whatever lay beneath. Valor approached the exposed steel. Instead of sniffing the ring, he moved toward the right side of the buried structure. He lowered his nose to a narrow crack almost invisible beneath the moss. Then he looked directly at Wes, not barking, waiting. Wes brushed away another layer of dirt. A second shape emerged, a weathered metal plate. Most of the paint had disappeared, but beneath the rust, one faded military stencil could still be read. Authorized personnel only. His fingers stopped moving. The forest seemed quieter than before. Even the birds had fallen silent. Wes looked from the warning plate to Valor, then back to the mountain. This wasn't built for hunters, he swallowed, or miners. Valor remained perfectly still beside the hidden entrance, as though he had known all along exactly where it was. Wes rested one hand on the cold steel. Even through layers of rust and mountain soil, the door felt unnaturally solid. Someone had expected this place to survive decades, maybe longer. He brushed away more dirt until the outline of the blast door became clear. Heavy hinges disappeared into the granite itself. Along one edge sat a recessed mechanical lock, unlike anything he had seen outside military facilities. No keypad, no electronics, only steel. The mountain had preserved it better than time should have allowed. Valor stepped closer and sniffed around the frame. He ignored the exposed handle. Instead, he focused on a narrow section beside the locking wheel. Wes followed the dog's attention. A small brass plate sat nearly hidden beneath moss. Its engraving had faded, but one word remained readable: access. He frowned. His father had never served in the military. At least that was the story Wes had believed for 67 years. So why would a Forest Service ranger own land hiding a reinforced government bunker? He searched the steel again. Nothing. Then his fingers drifted toward the old military watch strapped around his wrist. It had belonged to his father before it belonged to him. The crystal was scratched beyond repair. The leather band had been replaced twice. He turned it over absent-mindedly. Something caught his eye. A tiny slot, barely visible along the side of the watch case. He had worn it for years and never noticed. Using the tip of his folding knife, Wes pressed gently into the opening. A quiet click echoed inside the watch. The back cover lifted. Hidden beneath the movement rested a slim brass key wrapped in faded oilcloth. He stared at it for several long seconds. His father had carried this secret every day, without ever saying a word. Valor let out one quiet breath, almost as if he had been waiting for Wes to discover it. The key fit perfectly into the lock. Wes hesitated. Training returned before curiosity. He stepped away. Survey first. He studied the slope above them. Loose rock. No fresh tire tracks. No disturbed brush. No sign anyone had followed them. Satisfied, he returned. The key turned only halfway before resisting. He placed both hands on the heavy wheel. Steel groaned somewhere deep inside the mountain. One lock disengaged, then another. The sound rolled through the granite like distant thunder. Slowly, the blast door shifted inward. A wave of cool air flowed out. Dry. Still. Carrying the faint scent of machine oil and concrete. Not decay, not mold. The mountain had sealed whatever lay inside with astonishing precision. Darkness filled the opening. Wes removed the flashlight from his pack. Its narrow beam disappeared down a concrete corridor. The walls were smooth, painted government gray. Electrical conduit ran neatly overhead. Everything looked abandoned. Nothing looked destroyed. Valor entered first. His paws made almost no sound on the concrete. He paused every few yards, nose working steadily, then continued deeper. Wes followed. The blast door closed partially behind them under its own weight, leaving a narrow shaft of daylight at the entrance. The silence inside felt different from the silence outside. Outside belonged to nature. Inside belonged to people who had once expected alarms to sound at any moment. Dust covered the floor, but not deeply. No animal tracks. No nests. No water damage. At the first intersection, faded directional arrows still clung to the wall. Power, storage, operations, medical. Wes slowly turned in place. This wasn't an emergency shelter. His voice echoed softly. This was built to keep operating. He entered the operations room first. Rows of steel desks faced blank communication panels. Old rotary telephones rested exactly where someone had left them decades earlier. Maps of the western United States covered one wall beneath cracked plastic. Colored pins still marked locations across several states. Another room held shelves stacked with sealed military ration cases. The dates were astonishing. Many had never been opened. In the power room, massive diesel generators stood silent but remarkably clean beneath protective covers. Someone had maintained this place once, very carefully. Valor suddenly stopped. His ears lifted. Not toward the corridor behind them, toward a thick steel door at the far end of the operations center. Unlike every other room, this one remained locked. No rust, no visible damage, only a simple brass plaque. Authorized archive. Valor sat directly in front of it. He did not scratch. He did not bark. He simply waited. Wes stepped closer. His flashlight revealed another familiar lock, the same size, the same brass finish, the same craftsmanship as the hidden key in his father's watch. He reached into his pocket. The brass key felt unexpectedly warm in his hand. Whatever answers his father had carried in silence, they had not been left in the abandoned cabin. They had been waiting behind this door all along. The brass key slid into the lock with almost no resistance. Wes paused before turning it. His thumb rested against the worn metal, tracing tiny scratches left by another hand decades earlier. His father's hand. He closed his eyes for a single breath. Then the lock released with a quiet click. The steel door swung inward more easily than he expected. Cool air drifted out, carrying the faint scent of paper, cedar, and machine oil. Not forgotten. Preserved. Valor stepped through first. His movements slowed. He inspected every corner, every shadow, every doorway, before turning back toward Wes. The room beyond looked nothing like the operations center. There were no radios, no maps, no generators. Instead, rows of steel filing cabinets lined the walls beneath shelves of neatly labeled archival boxes. A large oak desk occupied the center of the room, its polished surface untouched by dust. Someone had covered it with a heavy canvas cloth years ago. Nothing felt abandoned. Everything felt prepared. A green banker's lamp still stood on the desk. Beside it rested a leather-bound journal and one envelope. Its cream-colored paper had yellowed with age. Across the front, written in unmistakable handwriting, were 4 simple words. For my son, Wesley. Wes didn't move immediately. The room blurred for a moment. Not from tears, from memory. A rotor wash, a burning convoy, a medic shouting over deafening noise, someone grabbing his shoulders. "Stay with us, Harper!" His breathing shortened. The overhead ventilation fan hummed softly. For one frightening second, it became helicopter blades. Valor quietly walked over and pressed his shoulder against Wes's leg. Solid. Warm. Real. The spinning sound faded. The bunker returned. Wes rested a trembling hand on Valor's neck. "Thanks, partner." Only then did he sit at the desk. He opened the envelope carefully, unfolding several handwritten pages. His father's handwriting was steady. "If you're reading this, then you trusted the mountains more than easy answers. I'm grateful for that." The first line alone forced Wes to stop. He hadn't heard his father's voice in years, yet suddenly he could. Calm, measured, never louder than necessary. "You probably spent your whole life believing I was only a Forest Service ranger. That wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the whole truth. For many years, I worked with a federal program that officially no longer exists. Our responsibility wasn't to fight wars. It was to protect what would matter if one ever reached our own soil. There are places in America built so quietly that even maps forgot them. This bunker is one of those places." Wes turned another page. "Your grandfather believed some burdens should never pass to children. I believed the same. That is why I never told you while I was alive. Not because I didn't trust you, because I wanted you to have the chance to live without carrying what I carried." Wes leaned back slowly. His father had always been distant, never cold, never cruel, simply absent in ways that now seemed impossible to understand. Another page. "If life has brought you here, then it means the burden found you anyway. For that, I'm sorry." Outside the archive, the bunker remained perfectly still. Inside, only paper whispered as Wes turned another page. His father described long winters maintaining generators that could never fail, inspections that officially never happened, deliveries arriving after midnight, people using names instead of ranks, always the same instruction. "Need to know." Then the letters changed. The writing became more personal. "I followed your Army career from farther away than I wanted. Every deployment, every promotion, every injury report. You never knew because I asked them not to tell you. I was proud long before you ever came home." Wes lowered the pages. His jaw tightened. For years he had convinced himself that silence meant disappointment. Now every sentence quietly dismantled that belief. Valor had wandered toward a low bookshelf. Instead of sniffing randomly, he stopped before one particular cabinet. He looked back. Waited. Wes walked over. The cabinet wasn't locked. Inside sat dozens of leather folders organized by year. Beneath them rested a smaller steel case. Heavy. Military issue. Stamped with faded lettering. Property inventory. He lifted it onto the desk. The latches opened with surprising ease. Inside lay neatly bundled government bonds, gold reserve certificates, property deeds, sealed envelopes bearing federal markings. Everything carefully cataloged. Even before counting, Wes understood. This wasn't forgotten wealth. It was protected responsibility. He closed the case again without touching anything else. Money had never changed who he was. Neither would this. He reached for the final page of his father's letter. "Whatever you discover here, remember one thing above all. These things were never meant to make a man rich. They were meant to keep a promise. If you still have the dog beside you, trust him when your instincts disagree with your fear. Dogs hear what pride refuses to listen to." Wes smiled despite himself. You would have liked him. Valor's ears lifted at the sound of his voice. For the first time since entering the bunker, the old German shepherd wagged his tail. Outside the archive room, somewhere deep within the mountain, a distant metallic sound echoed once. Not machinery, not settling rock. A door, closing. Farther inside the bunker, the sound lasted less than a second. Steel striking steel, not loud, not accidental. It carried through the mountain with the unmistakable weight of something built to survive a war. Wes froze. Every muscle tightened before his mind caught up. His breathing slowed automatically. Old instincts took over. He reached for the flashlight, thumb covering most of the lens to reduce the beam. His eyes swept every angle of the corridor. Left, right, ceiling, corners. No unnecessary movement. No silhouette breaking the darkness. Valor's ears pointed toward the deeper passage. The dog did not bark. That alone unsettled Wes more than any noise could have. Valor barked when danger wanted to be seen. Silence meant he was listening to something he hadn't yet identified. Wes crouched. "Easy, partner." The German shepherd glanced back once before taking 3 slow steps forward. The concrete hallway curved gently into another section of the bunker. Most rooms were locked behind heavy blast doors. Some stood slightly open, revealing stacks of sealed supply crates and maintenance equipment untouched for decades. Nothing explained the sound. By late afternoon, they returned to the archive room. Wes packed the letters carefully into his backpack. The government documents remained inside the steel case exactly where he had found them. He wasn't ready to move anything. Not until he understood what he actually possessed. His father's final words echoed through his thoughts. These things were never meant to make him was rich. They were meant to keep a promise. Outside, the mountain sunlight felt strangely bright after hours underground. Fresh pine carried on the breeze. Birdsong replaced the low mechanical hum of the bunker. For a moment, everything seemed ordinary again. Then Valor stopped. His head snapped toward the gravel road below. A black SUV climbed slowly through the trees. Too clean. Too expensive. Not the kind of vehicle that wandered into forgotten mountain property by accident. Wes watched from behind a cluster of lodgepole pines. The SUV parked nearly 200 yards away. A tall man stepped out first. Mid-50s. Pressed field jacket. Expensive hiking boots that had never truly hiked. 2 others followed, carrying leather portfolios instead of camping gear. Businessmen, not outdoorsmen. The older man smiled the moment he saw Wes. "Wesley Harper?" His voice carried easily across the clearing. "My name is Miles Grayson." He extended a hand. Wes never took it. "I'm with Black Ridge Mining." "I know, I was hoping we'd finally meet." Grayson looked around the property with practiced calm. His eyes lingered on the slope above the hidden bunker for barely half a second. Most people would never have noticed. Wes did. Combat engineers survived by catching moments everyone else ignored. Grayson knew exactly where to look. "I understand you've inherited this land. I haven't decided what I'm doing with it." "That's understandable." Grayson smiled again. "We're prepared to offer substantially more than market value." One of the attorneys opened a leather folder. The first page already contained purchase documents. Everything had been prepared before they arrived. "We can wire payment immediately." Wes remained silent. Grayson named the number. $500,000. For Rocky Wilderness, everyone in town had called worthless. Even the attorneys glanced toward him, measuring his reaction. Wes only looked back toward the mountain. "You people aren't interested in timber." "No." "You're not interested in mining either." Grayson's smile faded only slightly. "We believe the region has future value. You looked at one hillside before you looked at me." Silence settled between them. Grayson recovered first. "You noticed details." "I had to." Another pause. Then Grayson removed a business card. "If you change your mind, call me." He placed it on the hood of Wes's pickup instead of handing it over. The convoy disappeared down the mountain road 20 minutes later. Dust slowly settled across the pines. Only then did Wes walk toward the truck. He picked up the card. Heavy paper. Embossed lettering. Miles Grayson, Chief Executive Officer. Black Ridge Mining Corporation. Nothing else. No personal note. No pressure, just confidence. Too much confidence. That evening, Wes built a small cooking fire well away from the bunker entrance. Valor barely touched his food. Instead, the dog kept watching the trees beyond the campsite. Long after sunset, Wes extinguished the fire completely. Darkness returned to the mountain. He waited another hour before making a slow security sweep around the property. Halfway up the ridge, Valor lowered his nose to the ground. Fresh impressions. Boot prints. Not Wes's. Not old. Deep enough to have been made after Grayson's visit. The tracks approached the hidden entrance. Stopped. Turned away. Someone had come close enough to study the hillside, not close enough to find the bunker. Yet. Valor followed the scent another 30 yards before stopping abruptly. His body stiffened. His ears flattened. Then, without a sound, he turned around on his own and walked back toward Wes. He had found something. Or someone. And for the first time since arriving in the Absaroka Mountains, he chose retreat over pursuit. That decision told Wes everything he needed to know. Valor had tracked wounded elk through blizzards. He had followed fugitives during search operations after retirement. He never abandoned a trail unless the danger outweighed the reward. Wes knelt beside him. "What did you find?" Valor remained silent. His eyes never left the darkness between the pines. The old soldier trusted that answer more than words. They returned to camp without speaking. No fire, no lantern, no unnecessary noise. Wes scattered loose pine needles across the clearing, erasing their footprints before moving his truck 50 yards into thicker timber. If someone came looking after dark, they would find an empty campsite. The bunker entrance remained hidden beneath its camouflage. Before sunset, Wes carried only what mattered inside. His father's letters, the steel inventory case, medical supplies, a sleeping bag. The blast door closed behind them with a deep metallic thud. Inside, he shut off every light except a single battery lantern placed behind a concrete support column. Never silhouette yourself. The lesson had survived 20 years longer than most memories. Hours passed. The mountain settled. Pipes expanded and contracted with the cooling air. Every sound demanded evaluation. At 11:43 p.m., Valor lifted his head. No growl, just instant attention. 3 seconds later, Wes heard it too. Crunch, boot, pause, another crunch. Someone knew enough to move slowly. He extinguished the lantern. Darkness swallowed the operations room. His breathing remained steady. The footsteps multiplied. Not one person, at least 3. Outside, moving across the slope above the hidden entrance. A faint scraping sound echoed through the ventilation shaft. Metal touching rock. Testing. Searching. One flashlight beam slipped briefly across a crack near the concealed door almost before disappearing. "They're close," Wes whispered. Valor stood without hesitation. His ears rotated independently, tracking every sound. The men outside spread apart. Professional enough not to bunch together. Not military, private security. One voice drifted faintly through the ventilation duct. "Grayson said it's somewhere around here." Another answered, "Keep looking." So Miles Grayson hadn't found it. Not yet. Wes quietly unfolded one of the old bunker maps. Maintenance tunnels. Ventilation shafts. Emergency exits. There. A secondary escape passage climbed toward the opposite side of the ridge nearly 300 yards away, built in case the main entrance became compromised. He smiled faintly. Good engineers always planned another way out. Suddenly, a dull impact shook the blast door. Someone outside had found steel, not the entrance itself, just enough to know something artificial lay beneath the mountain. Another strike followed, then another, testing thickness, not trying to breach it. Not yet. Valor glanced toward Wes, waiting. Wes remembered another night. Afghanistan. A compound outside Kandahar. Young soldiers firing too early, giving away their positions. He had learned something there. Movement wins. Noise loses. He clipped a small emergency beacon onto an old supply crate. Timed delay. 5 minutes. He activated it. Then he and Valor disappeared into the maintenance corridor. They moved without flashlights, one hand sliding along painted concrete, counting intersections. Right. Left. Ladder. Emergency hatch. 5 minutes later, the beacon began flashing inside the operations room. From outside, it looked exactly like someone moving deeper inside the bunker. Immediately, the men reacted. Metal clanged against the blast door. Voices became urgent. "They're in there! Find another entrance!" Exactly what Wes wanted. They were chasing light, not people. He and Valor continued through the narrow maintenance tunnel until they reached the secondary observation port overlooking the valley. Through a concealed steel grate, Wes watched flashlights sweep wildly around the hillside below. 4 men now. 1 remained near the vehicles. 3 searched the rocks. They still had no idea where the emergency exit was. Then everything changed. One of the intruders wandered too close. Valor's muscles tightened. The man stepped directly over the hidden outlet. He paused, looked down. His boot scraped loose gravel. If he found the release handle, Valor exploded from the darkness. The German Shepherd struck with controlled force. Not wild, precise, exactly as years of service training demanded. The man crashed sideways with a shout, dropping his flashlight. The remaining intruders spun toward the noise. "Dog!" Valor released instantly and disappeared back into the trees before anyone could grab him. But one attacker reacted faster than the others. A folding knife flashed once through the darkness. A sharp yelp echoed across the mountainside. Wes's heart stopped. Valor! The dog sprinted toward him, favoring his left shoulder. Dark fur hid most of the blood, but not all. Wes dropped to one knee inside the concealed exit. Training erased panic. Pressure first. Check breathing. Check bleeding. The knife had sliced across the shoulder muscle. Painful. Deep. But not catastrophic. He opened an old military trauma kit stored beside the escape tunnel. Israeli bandage. Compression wrap. Antiseptic. His hands moved with practiced speed despite the shaking in his chest. Valor never pulled away. He simply watched Wes's face the entire time. "You bought us time." Wes tied off the final wrap. "I'm not wasting it." Outside, angry voices echoed through the forest. Flashlights scattered in every direction. Someone shouted for the injured man. Someone else cursed Miles Grayson by name. Inside the mountain, Wes looked down at the blood staining his own hands. For years, he had believed surviving meant finishing the mission, no matter the cost. Tonight, as Valor leaned quietly against his leg, he made a different decision. Nothing inside this bunker. Not documents. Not gold. Not $250 million. Would ever matter more than bringing his partner home alive. Wes stayed beside Valor until the old German Shepherd's breathing settled into its familiar rhythm. The bleeding had slowed. The bandage held. Only then did he allow himself to look beyond the injury. The mountain had gone quiet again. Too quiet. The men outside had retreated after failing to find another entrance. But Wes knew better than to mistake silence for safety. In Iraq, the longest pauses often came just before another move. He waited nearly an hour. No footsteps. No engines. Nothing. Finally, he helped Valor to his feet. The dog leaned slightly into his shoulder, but refused to stay behind. "You've still got your pride," Valor answered with one slow wag of his tail. Together they returned through the maintenance tunnel toward the archive room. The bunker felt different now, not mysterious, threatened. Someone besides his father had known enough to search for it. Someone had invested money, people, and time into finding whatever had been hidden beneath the Absaroka Mountains. Wes stopped beside the steel inventory case. He opened it again. This time he examined every folder instead of only the valuables. Each document had been indexed with military precision. Property records, treasury certificates, precious metal inventories, federal custodial agreements. Then, one sealed envelope caught his attention. Authorized successor protocol. He broke the wax seal carefully. Inside rested a thin binder stamped with a faded eagle emblem. The pages explained everything. Not in dramatic language, not in secrets. Just quiet government paperwork written by people who expected history never to notice them. After the Cold War, several strategic reserve sites had been quietly decommissioned. Most were emptied. A handful remained intact under federal custodianship until ownership questions could be legally resolved. This bunker was one of them. Its contents were never abandoned. They had simply been entrusted, generation after generation. Wes turned another page. His father's signature appeared beside annual inspection reports stretching back almost 30 years. Every inventory balanced, every seal verified, every inspection completed. His father had never owned the bunker. He had protected it. The final page carried one sentence highlighted in blue ink. If no federal custodian remains available, lawful responsibility transfers to the designated family successor until formal recovery is completed. Below that, his own name, Wesley Harper, assigned years before his father died. His chest tightened. His father had known that someday this burden might become his. Another folder contained engineering drawings, hidden vaults, secondary fuel systems, emergency communications. Then came the asset summary. Wes read it twice before believing it. Government reserve bonds, certified precious metal holdings, strategic communications equipment, long-term federal trust accounts, estimated protected value, $247,860,000. The title everyone would someday write about would say $250 million. The paperwork told a different story. None of it belonged to one man. It belonged to a promise. Suddenly, everything Grayson had done made perfect sense. He had never wanted wilderness. He had wanted control before anyone else discovered what legally remained beneath the mountain. Wes slowly closed the binder. His father had spent decades protecting something that wasn't his to spend. That realization somehow carried more weight than the fortune itself. Valor shifted beside him. His nose pointed toward another cabinet. Inside rested a final letter. Unlike the others, it wasn't addressed to Wes. It simply read, "To whoever becomes the last keeper." Wes unfolded it carefully. If you are reading this, then the country survived long enough that this place became history instead of necessity. That is the best outcome any guardian could hope for. Do not mistake value for purpose. The bonds will mature. The gold will always attract greedy men. But neither is why this bunker exists. Its true purpose is to remind one honest person that wealth without duty eventually destroys itself. If that person is you, choose people before property. Choose service before comfort. Choose tomorrow over possession. My son, if fate has placed this in your hands, I trust your judgment more than my own. You learned sacrifice somewhere I prayed you never would. Now learn peace. Wes folded the letter slowly. For several minutes he said nothing. Neither did Valor. The old dog rested his head across Wes's boot exactly as he had done countless nights after difficult memories returned. Outside, dawn began touching the mountain peaks with pale gold. Inside the bunker, the darkness finally seemed smaller. Wes looked once more at the inventory sheets worth nearly $250 million. Then he locked every document back inside the steel case. His decision came easily. He wasn't going to become the owner of a fortune. He was going to become its final guardian. And somewhere beyond the mountain, Miles Grayson was already planning his next move. The first official envelope arrived 2 days later. It was taped beneath the windshield wiper of Wes's old pickup. No stamp, no return address, just legal paper folded into thirds. Notice of claim. Black Ridge Mining Corporation asserted that the bunker and everything inside it constituted improperly retained federal property. Until ownership could be determined, they argued, Wes Harper should be prohibited from entering or removing anything from the site. Wes read the document once, then folded it neatly. Valor watched the tree line while Wes slipped the notice into his jacket beside his father's letters. "They're not after the mountain," he murmured. "They're after time." The county hearing was scheduled for the following week. It wasn't a criminal trial. It was a preliminary proceeding to determine temporary control of the property until federal agencies could review the records. Exactly the kind of delay Grayson wanted. Every day of uncertainty gave him another opportunity to manipulate the outcome. The morning of the hearing, Wes drove into Billings before sunrise. Valor occupied the passenger seat, his injured shoulder wrapped beneath a fresh bandage. He insisted on coming. Wes had tried leaving him behind. Valor simply refused to get out of the truck. The courthouse was modest compared to the federal buildings Wes remembered from military briefings. Brick, glass, American flag moving gently in the Montana wind. People hurried inside carrying coffee and briefcases. No one noticed the old veteran with the scarred hands or the aging German shepherd limping quietly beside him. Inside the hearing room, Miles Grayson already waited. His tailored suit looked as expensive as ever. 3 attorneys surrounded him. Boxes of documents filled one side of the room. Grayson smiled politely. "Mr. Harper, you made the trip. I don't miss important meetings. Neither do I." The county hearing officer called everyone to order. Black Ridge's attorneys spoke first. They argued that abandoned strategic facilities automatically reverted to federal control. They questioned Wes's authority to possess classified property. They implied he had unlawfully entered a restricted installation. Their presentation sounded polished, confident, prepared. Wes listened without interruption. Then Grayson himself stood. "I sympathize with Mr. Harper." His voice was calm, measured. He served this country honorably. I respect that. But honorable service does not create legal ownership. The safest solution is temporary transfer to an organization capable of protecting sensitive federal assets. He never once said Black Ridge by name. He didn't have to. Everyone understood. The hearing officer turned toward Wes. "Mr. Harper?" Wes rose slowly. He placed the worn leather folder containing his father's letters on the table. No dramatic gestures, no speeches. "My father spent 30 years protecting that bunker. He never sold anything. He never stole anything. He followed every instruction left to him. He handed over copies of the successor protocol and inspection records." The hearing officer read quietly. Questions began immediately. Then, a heavy steel courtroom door slammed somewhere in the hallway. The sharp metallic crash echoed through the chamber. For an instant, the courthouse disappeared. Concrete barriers, dust, the smell of burning fuel, someone yelling, "Incoming!" Wes's heartbeat surged. His breathing shortened. Every exit in the room appeared at once. Every face became a possible threat. He gripped the edge of the table harder than he realized. The room blurred. Then something warm touched his knee. Valor. The old German shepherd had quietly moved beneath the council table. He rested his head against Wes's leg, exactly as he had done countless nights after nightmares. No barking, no whining, just steady pressure. Breathe. Wes inhaled, held it, released it, again. The courtroom slowly returned. The hearing officer watched silently. She said nothing. She didn't need to. Grayson noticed the moment too. For the first time since this began, his confident expression shifted. He had expected an unstable veteran. Instead, he watched a man regain control without saying a single word. The hearing continued. Near the end, the courtroom doors opened once more. An elderly man entered carrying a weathered military records case. His back remained remarkably straight despite his age. Silver hair, navy blazer, Combat Engineer Association pin on the lapel. He introduced himself simply. Colonel Nathan Briggs, retired. Every eye turned toward him. I served with Daniel Harper. Wes looked up sharply. His father had rarely spoken about his own work. Briggs placed several sealed government files on the evidence table. I was asked to safeguard duplicates should anything happen to him. The original custodianship documents, the federal designation, the inspection authority, and every annual verification. The hearing officer carefully broke the seals. Each document matched the copies Wes had brought from the bunker, except these carried original federal signatures, original certification stamps, original chain of custody records. Briggs looked toward Wes. Your father believed this day might come. He hoped it never would. Then he turned toward Miles Grayson, and he specifically warned that someone would eventually confuse public service with private profit. Silence settled over the room. Not uncomfortable. Final. The hearing officer closed the final folder. I am issuing an immediate order. The Harper property remains under Mr. Harper's lawful possession pending federal review. All competing claims are temporarily suspended. She paused. Additionally, she looked directly at Grayson's attorneys. Questions concerning several submitted documents will be referred for independent examination. No one spoke. Miles Grayson slowly gathered his papers. His smile had disappeared. As he walked past Wes, he stopped for only a moment. This isn't finished. Wes looked at Valor before answering. No, it isn't. Because somewhere behind Grayson's controlled expression, Wes saw something he recognized from years in uniform. Not confidence, desperation. And desperate men almost always made dangerous mistakes. Wes had seen it before. On battlefields, inside burning vehicles, across negotiation tables. The moment people realized they were losing, they stopped thinking clearly. That made them dangerous. He and Valor returned to the Absaroka property before sunset. The mountains looked unchanged. Snow still clung to distant peaks. Wind still whispered through the lodgepole pines. Yet nothing felt peaceful anymore. Someone had crossed an invisible line. Wes parked beneath the trees instead of near the cabin. He carried only essentials. Medical kit. Flashlight. His father's letters, everything else remained locked inside the bunker. Valor's shoulder was healing, but the old German shepherd moved with measured caution. Every few minutes, Wes checked the bandage without saying a word. The dog tolerated it with quiet patience. Just before dusk, Colonel Briggs called over a crackling satellite phone he had loaned Wes after the hearing. The federal review team is coming. When? Tomorrow morning. Good. Briggs hesitated. I don't think Grayson will wait that long. Neither did Wes. After darkness settled over the valley, the temperature dropped quickly. The forest became still. Too still. Coyotes that had been calling across the ridge suddenly fell silent. Valor stopped drinking from his water bowl. His ears turned toward the western slope. Not the trail, higher. Rockfall country. Wes slowly set down his coffee. There. A faint metallic tick. Steel brushing stone. Almost too soft to hear. Almost. Valor rose without waiting for a command. His posture changed completely. The friendly retired service dog disappeared. In his place stood the working dog Wes had trusted through countless training exercises. Wes extinguished every light. No fire, no lantern, no flashlight. Moonlight became enough. He and Valor moved separately, never together. Old habit. If one was found, the other remained free. Wes circled downhill through a stand of spruce while Valor disappeared silently between the rocks. The first shadow appeared 5 minutes later, then another. 3 men. No voices. Night vision goggles. Suppressed rifles. Professionals. Not miners. Not hikers. One man unpacked cutting equipment near the hidden entrance. Another studied printed satellite photographs. The third provided security. Wes counted distances automatically. 50 yards, 40, 35. Too close. His radio remained silent. No one was coming before sunrise. Suddenly, a small pebble rolled beneath one intruder's boot. The man froze. He lifted his weapon toward the darkness. Valor acted first. A sharp bark exploded across the opposite hillside. Every flashlight swung toward the sound. The dog darted through the trees, deliberately exposing himself for only a second before vanishing again. After him. 2 men broke formation immediately, exactly as Valor intended. The third remained near the entrance. Wes used those precious seconds to slip closer. He kicked loose a dead pine trunk resting against the slope. The heavy log rolled downhill, crashing through brush and scattering rocks. The remaining guard spun instinctively toward the noise. Wrong direction. Wes closed the distance. Years had stolen speed from him, not timing. He tackled the man before a shot could be fired. The rifle slid into the brush. Both men crashed against the rocky ground. The intruder scrambled free and reached for a handgun. Before he could aim, Valor returned. He struck from the side with controlled force, knocking the weapon away. The man cried out, but another figure emerged from the darkness above. A single gunshot cracked across the mountain. Not suppressed, loud enough to echo for miles. Valor jerked backward. He stumbled, then collapsed onto his side. Wes. There was no one there to call his name. The shout came from inside his own memory. Another battlefield, another friend falling. For one terrifying heartbeat, the mountain disappeared. Then he saw the blood spreading through Valor's fur. Everything else ceased to matter. The remaining intruders fled into the darkness, abandoning their equipment. Wes never chased them. Not this time. He dropped beside Valor. Stay with me. His hands found the wound, high across the ribs, a grazing shot. Painful, bloody. But the chest still rose, still fell. He ripped open another trauma dressing. Pressure, wrap, recheck breathing. The same sequence he had performed on soldiers years before. Only now his hands shook harder. Valor opened one eye. His tail tapped the ground once. Just once. Enough. You stubborn old fool. Wes laughed despite the tears burning his eyes. You scared me. Far below, sirens echoed faintly through the valley. Someone in a nearby ranch must have reported the gunshot. The attackers were gone, leaving behind dropped tools, tire tracks, and enough evidence to answer questions they had hoped no one would ask. Hours later, under bright surgical lights at the veterinary emergency clinic in Billings, a gray-haired veterinarian finally stepped into the waiting room. Wes stood before she spoke. He'll make it." The words nearly gave out beneath him. The bullet only grazed him, a few inches lower. She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Wes entered the recovery room quietly. Valor lay asleep beneath warm blankets. One ear twitched as Wes sat beside him. The old veteran rested a weathered hand gently against his partner's neck. "I spent too many years believing every mission was worth any price." He looked at the sleeping dog. "I was wrong." Outside the clinic window, dawn painted the Montana sky with pale gold. For the first time since discovering the bunker, Wes knew exactly what he would protect first. And it wasn't the fortune waiting beneath the mountain. It was the friend who had led him there. 3 days later, Valor walked out of the veterinary clinic on his own. His steps were slower. His left side remained shaved beneath a clean bandage, but his head stayed high. The technician smiled as she handed Wes the discharge papers. "He's tougher than he looks." Wes scratched gently behind Valor's ears. "So am I." The drive back into the Absaroka Mountains felt different. For the first time in years, the road ahead wasn't simply another place to survive. It was home. Federal vehicles already waited near the property when they arrived. Plain SUVs, no flashing lights, no television cameras, just professionals quietly unloading sealed cases and document scanners. Colonel Nathan Briggs stood beside them. So they finally came. They did. They've been inside since dawn. Wes parked without asking another question. A woman wearing a federal field jacket approached and introduced herself. "My name is Rebecca Sloan, Department of the Treasury." She extended her credentials. "We've completed an initial verification." Her tone remained professional, but there was unmistakable respect in her voice. "Everything your father documented matches our archives. The inventory, the inspection records, the succession protocol." She paused. "Your father protected federal assets for nearly 3 decades without a single discrepancy." Wes looked toward the mountain. He never told anyone. "That," Sloan answered quietly, "is probably why everything is still here." Inside the bunker, teams photographed every room exactly as it had been found. Each seal was documented, each certificate catalogued, each vault opened under formal procedure. Hours passed. No excitement, no dramatic announcements, only careful work. Near sunset, Sloan returned carrying a thin folder. The estimated value was accurate, approximately $250 million. She placed the folder in Wes's hands. "Legally, those reserve assets return to the United States." He nodded once. "I expected that." She studied him carefully. Most people wouldn't react that way. They were never mine. They never belonged to my father either. He just kept his promise. For the first time all day, Sloan smiled. "I think he chose the right successor." The next surprise arrived before dusk. A second federal investigator approached carrying another document. "This concerns you personally." Wes frowned. "I don't understand." The government established a custodial compensation fund decades ago. It was intended for individuals assigned to maintain strategic reserve facilities. No one ever claimed your father's payments. They accumulated. She handed him the final page. The total was enough to change anyone's life. Not hundreds of millions, but enough to buy land, build homes, start over. Entirely legal, entirely earned. Wes folded the document carefully. His father had never taken what wasn't his. Even his own compensation had remained untouched. Meanwhile, events outside the mountain moved quickly. Federal investigators obtained search warrants for Black Ridge mining. Computers disappeared from corporate offices. Financial records were seized. Forged property filings surfaced one after another. Within days, Miles Grayson resigned. Within weeks, Criminal investigators announced multiple fraud charges involving falsified land claims across several western states. Wes never celebrated. Watching another man fall brought him no satisfaction. Justice felt quieter than revenge. One afternoon, Colonel Briggs joined him on the porch of the old cabin. Valor slept nearby beneath the warm Montana sun. The bandage was gone now. Only a narrow scar remained beneath his fur. "What will you do now?" Briggs asked. Wes looked across the meadow. The cabin leaned with age. The barn roof sagged. The land stretched peacefully toward the distant timberline. He thought about his father's letters. Choose people before property. Choose service before comfort. Then he remembered every shelter he had slept in after returning from Iraq. Every veteran he had met who no longer believed tomorrow held anything worth waiting for. I know exactly what comes next. Several weeks later, he met with representatives from a nonprofit organization that specialized in helping homeless veterans and retired service dogs. Not with speeches, not with ceremonies, just around a wooden table covered with blueprints. "I don't want to build a monument," Wes said quietly. "I want to build a place where people stop feeling forgotten." The director looked around the property. "The mountain already knows how to protect people. We'll simply give it another mission." Construction began before winter. Old cabins were repaired instead of demolished. Solar panels appeared beside restored workshops. Walking trails replaced abandoned logging roads. The bunker itself remained sealed under federal supervision, preserved as part of American history. Only a handful of people would ever know everything hidden beneath the mountain. That was enough. One evening, as workers packed away their tools, Wes noticed Valor making his usual slow patrol around the property. The old German shepherd paused at the ridge overlooking the hidden bunker. He looked back once, satisfied, then continued toward the cabin. Still working, even after everything. Wes smiled. "So am I, partner." 1 year later, the road into the Absaroka property no longer looked forgotten. It still curved through pines and stone and cold mountain shadow, but now fresh gravel held the ruts together. A wooden sign stood near the entrance, carved by hand, simple enough to belong there. Harper Ridge Veterans Recovery Center. Below it, in smaller letters, someone had burned in another line, "For those who came home but never stopped searching." Wes had argued against putting his name on it. Everyone ignored him. The old cabin stood repaired now, its roof straight, its porch solid beneath heavy boots. 3 smaller cabins sat beyond it, warm lights glowing in their windows after sunset. A training yard stretched near the meadow, where retired service dogs learned that not every command meant danger anymore. Valor moved slower these days. His muzzle had gone nearly white. The scar along his side disappeared beneath thick fur unless the light caught it just right. Every morning before breakfast, he still walked the same patrol route around the property. Past the cabins, past the workshop, past the trailhead, then up toward the sealed bunker door hidden behind stone and pine. Wes followed at a distance, letting him work. Some habits were not meant to be taken away. Inside the main lodge, men who once slept in cars now sat at a long table drinking coffee. Some talked. Some only listened. A young veteran with shaking hands repaired an old lantern beside the window, while a retired Marine brushed a nervous shepherd mix on the floor. No one rushed anyone here. The mountain did not heal people quickly. It gave them room. That was enough to begin. Some nights, Wes still woke before dawn. The room would be dark. The wind would hit the side of the cabin just right. For half a second, his hand would reach toward a weapon that was not there. Then Valor would shift beside the bed. A quiet breath, a warm body, a paw against the floorboards. Wes would lower his hand into the old dog's fur and wait until the room became a room again. Not Iraq, not fire, not loss. Just Montana. Just home. The bunker remained under federal protection, sealed but preserved. Once a month, officials came to inspect it. Once a year, a small group of historians walked through the outer rooms with cameras and white gloves. Wes never went deeper than the archive. That was where his father's letters stayed now, copied and preserved, but the originals remained in the desk drawer where Wes had first found them. On quiet afternoons, he sometimes sat there and read one page, never more than one. Some words carried enough weight for a whole day. Near sunset, Valor finished his patrol and stopped at the trail above the bunker. Wes stood beside him. Below them, smoke rose gently from the lodge chimney. Laughter drifted from the porch. A dog barked once, then another answered from the yard. The place once built to survive war had become a place for surviving after war. Wes looked down at Valor. "You found it before I did." The old dog leaned against his leg. Wes locked the outer gate to the bunker, slipped the brass key back into his father's watch, and turned toward the trail home. Valor waited a few steps ahead, framed by golden light between the pines. For a moment, Wes saw the whole road behind them. The parking lot, the $1, the cold truck, the mountain, the blood on his hands, the door beneath the earth. Then he saw only what was in front of him. A path, a dog, a home full of lights. Wes Harper stepped into the evening beside his oldest friend, and the mountains held their silence around them. Not empty this time. Peaceful. If Wes and Valor's journey meant something to you, let me know with a simple comment. Just type 1 if you believe loyalty can change a life, or type 0 if you think everyone deserves one more chance to start over. I read as many comments as I can, and I'd truly love to know which side you're on. And if stories about courage, second chances, loyal dogs, and unforgettable heroes are the kind you enjoy, please subscribe and join us. There are many more powerful journeys waiting just around the corner. Until next time, take care of yourself, and never underestimate the friend who refuses to leave your side.